Howdy fellow tubers, another year has passed us by. It feels like the world has returned to a semblance of normalcy, and yet gotten stranger in the midterm. So many tragic, mundane, but meaningful, and even amazing things happened personally and to the world at large. There was some big-time family drama. I managed to squeak out at least one other video besides my year-opening countdown and reaction vids. I did some landscaping to feel like I have a real job. My family went to see the Grand Canyon for the first time. I went to arcades in real life for the first time in years. I got my holidays interrupted by the dreaded Rona, and got everything I wanted for Christmas, including my younger brother visiting from Palm Springs. In the world at large, the ups and downs included the Winter Olympics 2022, which I personally found of particular interest because of Nathan Chen's epic gold medal performance in figure skating. The US evacuating Iraq after 20 plus years. COVID restrictions lightened up and the world returned to a semblance of normalcy. Obi-Wan Kenobi fought Darth Vader once more on streaming services. And we all laughed at the absurdity that was Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. Anyways, enough reminiscing. You're here to see what eclectic mix of games I managed to play this year, so let's be off with it. 10. The dwarves might have dug too greedily and too deep into the depths of Moria, but their greed does not compare to the hubris of those that would build a prison inside a mountain containing the abyss, and use it as a gladiatorial exhibition to punish their political opponents. Welcome to Grimrock. The thing about the Legend of Grimrock is that it's not all that different from a multi-floored Zelda dungeon, without the designated item-based puzzle solutions, which means virtually every puzzle can be solved as soon as it's encountered. Because the dungeon lacks extensive interconnectivity, it has to make each individual set piece as memorable as possible. The most iconic is probably these glowing teleportation fields that could send you anywhere from right next to a dangerous critter, or just 5 paces back. And getting through the game means constantly working out the safe passage around them. While you're on that, you have to contend with a rune-based spell system, which is input in real time, and a damage system that takes into account the target's orientation, doing more or less damage depending on which side it hits. Because movement is tile-based, higher level play involves a comical dance of player and monster circling each other, trying to line up a clear shot to land higher damaging hits. It's super rough when you're ambushed on multiple sides or wedged into a wall, but also incredibly satisfying when you can get these big brutes repeatedly charging and attack as they rush by to take them out. The final boss encounter, which I won't spoil, is founded on an incredible set piece that puts these mechanics to their ultimate use: shutting closed the jaws of oblivion.
9.
You ever think to yourself, wouldn't it be great if there was a platformer that had Isle Delfino, a Sly Cooper heist, the Lost Woods, and a level based off the Titanic? Hat Kid lives in a small mansion that's also a spaceship, decorated and furnished with all kinds of things a child with infinite funds and no supervision would pick. Her ship is powered by magical hourglasses, which get scattered to the far corners of the globe when a Russian mafia tries to extort payment out of her by knocking on the front window in space. So now she has to reckon with a colorful cast of crazies, including a girl with a mustache, an army of Russian mobsters, a spooky ghost, and 2 rival film directors who are Scrooge McDuck and the King of the Prinnies. Mechanically, Hat Kid is a fun, nimble character who combines double jumps and air dashes to zip around levels, grabbing green orbs and yanking yarn balls at just the perfect speed. And I really like the automatic upwards wall run that compensates for imperfect ledge grabs. Most of the time. The hats and badges system, which adds a nice economy of progression, was a bit of a hit and miss for me personally, but I did enjoy using the anime umbrella laser during boss fights. Meanwhile, palette swaps and hat flares, which existed entirely for Fashion Souls, were my jam, and I totally want to see them all when I get back to this. Speaking of bosses, the game goes out on a high note with a super meta final boss that comes pretty early in the completion process, and is only spoiled by the fact that your contract has expired, which absolutely slaps and is one of my new favorite Halloween gaming tracks, is not the final boss theme. That being said, it wraps a very nice bow around the package that is this Kickstarter diamond in the rough. One archetype I feel is underrepresented in gaming are true master thieves. Sure, we have stealthy assassins aplenty, but I'm looking for people who use their mobility to avoid confrontation, not escalate violence. And while I love Sly Cooper and Therion, they're both blowhards that have to have the last word. Thankfully, Garrett has no patience for that kind of self-important loudness.
I have a simple job planned for this evening. Break into a guarded mansion, steal another fat nobleman's priceless trinket, and leave quietly.
He's determined to use his singular talents for personal gain. He refuses to be swayed by hypocritical societal morals.
He'd been arrested by the Hammerites. Apparently they didn't approve of his occupation, and I doubt they approve of mine. So...
And if you ever cross him, he's not going to broadcast that debate for the world to see. He'll just rob you blind. Funner still is the world Garrett inhabits. It's a weird mashup of medieval fantasy and early 20th century iconography. Even when Thief asks the player to visit the obligatory opulent mansions, it's under specific circumstances that change the context each time. But there's also tombs to plunder, prisons to break into and out of, the sanctum of an order of mages, a haunted church compound, and at least one level that just goes on the list of most fantastical levels in gaming. The atmosphere is especially emphasized by the low poly graphics, and these rotoscoped narrative cutscenes are some of the trippier nonsense I've seen in a game. Then there's the mechanics. Garrett isn't as mobile as other stealth characters I've played as, so playing through this game, I was constantly missing that view from the rooftops. But when you get a good feel for the physics, work around the AI's kinks, and use the tools that are available to you, it's very satisfying to knock out all the guards in a building and walk around knowing you can go anywhere you want, grab everything that isn't nailed down, and then spend the money you made from the haul on tools to use in the next mission. It hasn't aged perfectly, needing to be modded to actually experience the story, but I had a blast, and I finally have my proper thief. Dwarves might have dug too greedily and too deep into the depths of Moria, but their greed does not compare to the hubris of those that would make a bid for immortality over the graves of a civilization that plunged itself into ruin through nuclear war. I first learned about SteamWorld Dig when my experience with Minecraft was fresh, and I was enamored with the idea of anything where I could tear apart the environment for resources. A Metroidvania with solid mobility and curated action was literally the only thing that would have made that deal better. Oddly enough, I ended up with something more like Dig Dug as a Metroidvania than Minecraft. With severe limitations on the blocks and lighting you can place, and without the ability to dig diagonally or while jumping, you have to be very conscientious of what blocks you remove or risk getting stuck without a way out. Then there's those indestructible blocks that fall when supports are removed, and spell instant death for players and enemies alike. Even the very finite resources you dig up can be squished. All of which makes the various upgrades you can buy or acquire through the story's required platforming challenges all the more satisfying. Rusty feels great to control from the get-go, and his wall jump, while not always being as sticky as I want, is really helpful for getting out of the nearly hopeless situations I got myself into. But every upgrade just makes you feel that much more hardy, mobile, and destructive. Even if I wasn't playing as part of my deliberate quest to finish all these games, I'm not sure I could have put it down before I was done, because I just want to keep digging that little bit further.
6.
The original Donkey Kong Country trilogy, and 64, are some of my favorite games of all time, both for their irrefutable quality and for the memories of playing them with my family. Unfortunately, Returns was really janky on the Wii, and I wasn't expecting Tropical Freeze to register all that high when I played it as a throwaway title this summer. I'd already gotten through the Savannah's admittedly amazing levels on 2 separate playthroughs, and had seen the Popsicle World's design broken down. So how much more was there really to impress? Well, after I played through a whole world of some of the best water levels in the series, I started noticing all the little things Tropical Freeze changes that either fix problems that Returns had, or adds features that even the original trilogy didn't offer. First, they backed off the insta-kills in the cart rocket stages to just a heart, which is really important in my opinion because minecart madness is bad enough without insta-kills, thanks. Then there's me finally noticing the cool stuff they added to the shop, like health boosts, banana juice, crash guard, and even whole DK barrels to bring back a Kong with their bonuses. It goes without saying the music is great the entire game, but even after being desensitized to it by Siva Gunner's Sweet Dreams parody cover, the Snowman theme still hits super hard when you're climbing a frozen DK aisle during an avalanche to fight the Snowman King. Finally, we hit the strongest contender with Captain K. Rool for the best final boss in the series, with phases that are all challenging, but telegraphed fairly. Then there's all the other stuff I'd already experienced before this year, and cooler people than me have already sung the praises of. The world building through all the platforms existing in real space. How the coins, puzzle pieces, and Kong letters all create a collectathon infrastructure that is arguably the most cohesive in the series. And the whole Savannah world again because riding Rambi through a tornado is peak platforming. There may be no competing with nostalgia, but quality speaks for itself. What happens when Microsoft, trying to compete with Nintendo in the gaming industry, hires the creator of Sonic and Knights, the producer of Killer 7, and the guy who wrote the music for Neon Genesis Evangelion? One of the most bonkers experiences on the original Xbox. I've tried to get through this game multiple times before, the first of which was back when the original Xbox was the new hotness, and the second was a few years ago, around the time I started recording my playthroughs for YouTube. Weirdly enough, this year, I needed a backup time travel themed game to replace my brother's misplaced copy of Fire Emblem Awakening, and I was surprised at just how well it holds up. For real, I never noticed how much this music slaps. The main theme is right up there with Mario and Sonic for how memorably hype-inducing it is. The game also has some real ambition to its design, combining a vacuum and relaunch combat system with time crystals following the logic of old VCR controls. Pause, rewind, fast forward, and even record. Admittedly, all that ambition isn't always executed flawlessly, a lock-on feature or aiming reticule would not be remiss, and the time powers need more utility. But it is never not satisfying to sweep a full bag's load, nail a 4-moon combo, pause time, and blast every jerk in the area in the face. Even the boss fights are more Yoshi's Island than Donkey Kong Country in the school of larger versions of normal enemies. Trust me, I got very familiar with all of them because there is a very challenging boss rush that marathons right into the final boss. Part of the impact is probably because I stuck around and mastered something that's Dark Souls hard for all the wrong reasons, but despite how good a lot of final boss fights were even on this year's list, it has been a long time since I felt this absolutely engaged to finally achieve relief in a satisfying final boss.
4.
Vanilla Kirby has never quite clicked with me. Give me Combo Kirby, Yarn Kirby, or even Ball Kirby any day of the week. But Forgotten Land manages to rise above this, not just by going 3D, but by growing beyond the go left to right, fight some guys along the way, and maybe solve a puzzle or two structure. At first glance, it's because the 3D level design allows for freer mobility and more complex spaces to set side quests that are admittedly pretty darn cool, like escorting some ducklings to their mom, matching the shapes of the mouthful abilities to cutouts in the walls, and using the water mouthful ability to reenact that time SpongeBob tried to give Gary a bath. However, what truly makes Forgotten Land a major improvement for the series is that there's actually an incentive to go out and do things at all. How are you awarded these amazing accoutrements? By acquiring an assortment of new articles of collection. Seeing as how copy abilities finally have a progression system, you have 2 collectibles just for that. Blueprints, specific to unlocking each ability advancement, and treasure stars, required to actually upgrade the ability. Modern Kirby's infamous lore has been condensed into bite-sized fragments and attached to Smash-style trophies. Finally, coins, which have been in Kirby for a while, but have been promoted from an extra lives counter to a currency used for everything we've already discussed, as well as purchasing food from a restaurant in a to-go order, which can recover health whenever you want, and temporary boosts to Kirby's max health, attack, and speed. Going back to the moment-to-moment gameplay, all the little features the upgraded copy abilities bring to the table is really nice. But a neat thing I noticed is how they evolve joke and one-shot abilities like Sleep and Crash into actually dynamic and interesting abilities I'm willing to sack my current power for. The mouthful abilities aren't as cool as the Robo-Bo-Bo-Bo-Bobot, but there's a car for racing challenges, the fridge from Crystal Shards returns, and did I mention, what are you waiting for, Gary? Ultimately, all that substance enabled me to actually enjoy the charm the franchise is known for, and that alone makes it worth this spot.
3.
What is a fantasy? What makes it final? Once again, I find myself contemplating these questions as I work my way through the mainline Final Fantasies. Final Fantasy VIII doesn't go nearly as hard as 6 and 7. It's got a fairly bland overworld, and despite playing at having a more logical, grounded story, its child protagonists are even more inexplicably the literal center of the universe, and yet, I like these guys. Essentially a bunch of child soldiers getting shoved into positions they're not ready for, but still managing to achieve their objectives in a believable fashion, makes this story work for me in a way no other game in this franchise besides Final Fantasy X has ever worked for me. Squall giving Irvine a pep talk to follow through on his boasting as a sharpshooter, breaking out of a prison because you can't disarm a monk, and Selphie's team razing a missile base to the ground through sheer outrage are some of the most legitimately heroic moments in the series, in my opinion. Not to mention the mysterious flashbacks that let the player gradually piece together a lot of the game's lore before it's outright stated. Also, was not ready for this scene after hearing this theme a million times on YouTube with radically different context. But enough about the story, I'm here for the combat, and Final Fantasy VIII delivers. The draw and junction systems are a true refinement of the Materia and Esper systems, allowing the player to customize each character's stats, command abilities, and support abilities, while also more clearly designating what summon each character is working with. Drawing magic either to stockpile or cast means I always have choices to be making in a fight besides most cost-effective, hard-hittingest move. The fact that there were times where I resorted to novel strategies involving what I could draw cast from the enemy and have it work is a testament to how versatile this system is. The limit system is improved, having more complex interactive mechanics, while accounting for both party condition and a specific power-up spell type, such that you can use limits constantly. Lastly, the cherry on the top are the minigames. Triple Triad, the straightforward and easy to understand, but difficult to master card game, and Chocobo World, the Tamagotchi-like item farm. Anyways, I like the ending, and I am choosing to ignore any evidence for the fan theory. Bye! Ever since I started trying out more action games, a certain franchise has kept butting into the conversation, and now that I've played it...
It looks like we have a winner.
Jackpot.
Yes, the wisecracking demon slayer in the red trench coat is just as cool as they say. He's an apex predator that few things can truly hurt. He's seen it all, and what little he hasn't seen amuses him more than it surprises him. So he treats everything like a joke, until his antagonists start making emotionally charged personal attacks, and when that happens, he doesn't let his anger throw off his judgment. Despite that, he's also a bit of a sentimental dork.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
Which all translates to how he handles the combat scenarios he's placed into, and helps make it what it is. Between the lightning sword and fiery gauntlets, he can either swiftly slice his way from enemy to enemy, or explosively punch through them. He uses rapid-fire handguns, not just to shoot flying nuisances out of the sky, but to style on mooks by keeping them airborne after launching them off the ground. All that effort is rewarded with charges for a flashy super mode that auto-heals, lets you fly, and can set off huge explosions that nuke most enemies. Meanwhile, your proficiency in replicating Dante's sense of style is graded in a mission system, which is such a weird way to run through an otherwise fully realized semi-open map, but it allows for subtle changes from mission to mission that promote a sense of time progression. Optional secret missions, which have their own rewards, and the scoring system itself, which provides a definitive goal to strive towards beyond simply survive as you explore the game's world. I'm beginning to feel like I might be biased to gothic fantasy, but this is one of the rare games that captures that feeling I had when playing Symphony of the Night the first time, descending into the catacombs, and comprehending the many generations, if not civilizations, of humanity who had been drawn to, and been incorporated into, the history of monsters and madness at this one location. From the central hall, to the biplane storage room, to the ruins in the forest, and especially the half-submerged ghost ship, the island of Fortuna is one of those game overworlds that's just fun to explore while styling on the occasional monster. Unfortunately, this is definitely one of those games where the real game starts after you finish. But even though I didn't have time for that, the first playthrough was a blast. Before we get to number 1, turns out I actually managed to get through enough games to have a decent set of honorable mentions again. So let's run through those real quick. Them's Fighting Herds. I realize the My Little Pony aesthetic isn't for everyone, but in addition to playing quite well, the story mode, despite the fact that it's unfinished, provides a fairly solid jumping in point for traditional 2D fighters. The first boss, in particular, clearly demonstrates how the mechanics of a fighter can be adapted to more open, action game style single-player content if you think outside the perfectly symmetrical one-on-one fights codified by Street Fighter. Forager. This game is a resource-gathering, buildy sandbox that tries to do everything from furniture arranging, to completing an obscenely large list of collectibles, to an Elder Scrolls-like perk system, to action RPG combat, and Zelda-esque dungeons. It doesn't do any of those things particularly well, but it's fairly satisfying to keep doing tasks and progressing towards the next upgrade until you get bored or find inspiration for another project. Dragon Quest V. Really good, multi-generational story that respects the player's intelligence enough to let them read between the lines of events and character actions, while providing a solid amount of optional dialogue that fleshes out characters more than full cutscenes in other games through party chat. By the end, I was pretty fond of Bianca, Pancraz, and the twins, despite their relatively small screen time. I really like the idea of the board-style minigames and the creature taming. I just wish the mechanics weren't so dry. Also, because no one else seems to bring it up, there's a dragon who masquerades as a human named Dr. Agon.
1.
Now we come to the final high-tier game I managed to play in 2022. Just Skyrim. Yes, I really did play The Elder Scrolls V for the first time in 2022. And what can I say that smarter, more fanatic people than myself haven't already said? It's Skyrim. It takes all the buzzkills of the older games and tosses them into, well, oblivion. For example, I've wanted to play an alchemist salesman by day, creepy ghost thief by night for a long time, but intelligence mains can't carry more than a few cotton balls before they get anchored to the floor. Skyrim provides so many features to alleviate that problem that with enough patience, I didn't truly have problems carrying all the valuable loot out of a dungeon in one trip until I started trying to haul every single Dwemer object out of a massive dungeon while on a mission for the Mages Guild. The leveling system is just straight up more fun. Yeah, I like min-maxing as much as the next guy, but crafters couldn't improve just by crafting. Casters might have been able to break the game, but they had arbitrary feeling requirements for how they leveled. And the optimal way to level a stealth build without magic involved tying a rubber band to your controller overnight. In Skyrim, I can in fact chase butterflies across the plains, stumble upon some bandits, loot their cave, come back to the base, craft a bunch of junk, then sell it to make loads of money, with which I level up. Leveling even comes with some extra perks, which can be applied to any skill, not just the ones you used this level. It doesn't hurt that encounter design is really amazing this time around. I definitely would have enjoyed Oblivion more if every other cave I explored had level design this diverse, encounter pacing with larger, higher level enemies used to approximate bosses, and something comparable to a shout as a reward at the end. Speaking of the shouts, while a lot of the functions they offer could have easily been incorporated in the magic system, having this super cool, unique thing that doesn't cost mana adds variety to the combat, and being exclusive to whatever questline or location makes exploring the world all that more memorable. This is the first Elder Scrolls game where I've wanted to go do just about everything, and then download some mods while I'm at it just because the loop is that engaging. There's still plenty to improve on for Elder Scrolls 6. I'm still bitter about removing levitation, Bethesda, but 10 years late to the party, Skyrim is still the best new game I played this year. So there you have it. Some old, some new, and some weird. Hope you were entertained by my comments on games you've already experienced, or maybe you found something cool you'd never seen before. I've got quite the lineup planned for next year, and while some of it will, as always, inevitably be cut, I expect to have a lot of fun this year. I've also got a clearer vision of how I want to get out a few more videos this year, so fingers crossed I'll actually do it. Wishing you all a happy 23, and God bless you all.